Amazon, many of you may probably know that they've been trying to break into the gaming market for a while now, for a number of years, since 2014 basically, and they've been incredibly unsuccessful at doing so. Let me just paint you a picture here. Of the 6 projects, major projects that we know about from them, only one of them is still in active development, and the rest have either been canceled or just straight up died. Among the games that recently got canceled is Lord of the Rings. Back in 2019, they announced that they were working on this game with another company, China-based developers known as Lavoie Technologies Holdings. But then something happened in December that disrupted all of this. Tencent purchased Lavoie Technologies, and they had to essentially rework some contracts since Tencent now owned Lavoie, and they had their own ideas for what this Lord of the Rings game should be. And in the ensuing discussions about contract negotiations, there was a dispute that eventually led to the game's cancellation, as Amazon and Tencent could not see eye to eye on some aspect of this project, whether it's its overall direction or something else. I would also assume that the dispute might have had something to do with behind-the-scenes business dealings, whether it's, how they're going to split revenue and stuff like that. I don't know. The article doesn't offer too many details, but basically Tencent and Amazon were not seeing eye to eye, and so they just couldn't proceed with the project, and Amazon had to cancel. The title is described as an online role-playing game based on the fantasy series Lord of the Rings, which likely means it's either a shared world game or an MMO, one of those two. Definitely an online-focused experience. This is all reported by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who spoke to people familiar with the matter who obviously were asked not to be identified, but he also reached out to Amazon to make sure that this was for real, and an Amazon spokesperson did confirm that we have been unable to secure terms to proceed with this title at this time. And the spokesperson also added, "We love the Lord of the Rings IP and are disappointed that we won't be bringing this game to customers." And so what's going to happen is that the people who were working on this Lord of the Rings online RPG will be moved to other projects. So I guess New World, which is the only project that we still know is currently active, though maybe Amazon has some other ideas that they're throwing around that other developers are working on that they haven't announced yet. But yeah, it's just been a string of failures, one after another, for Amazon's game division. Now, there are plenty of good reasons for why Amazon has been so unsuccessful with breaking into the video games market, and this was all explained in this investigative report by Jason Schreier from back in January 29th, 2021. It all starts with an executive going by the name of Mike Frazzini, who helped kickstart Amazon Game Studios and who helped manage a lot of it, but never made a video game in his life. And despite his lack of experience in this field, when developer staff members who were experienced and who knew how game development worked tried to provide feedback on how he should do things, he ignored much of their advice. And it didn't help matters that Amazon's way of doing things wasn't conducive to a game development environment, with Bloomberg reporting that the company is driven by data and would expect developers to do things like write 6-page documents to get major decisions approved. Game development cannot be so regimented that it hampers creative flow. A lot of what makes a good game is measured only in emotion. There's no way to quantify what makes a game fun, if you know what I mean. The process of game development is that of ideas constantly building on top of each other, developers trying different things, and it's this ebb and flow that cannot be disrupted by this data-driven process that kind of keeps them in check and doesn't allow that creative process to flow naturally, because at the end of the day, there's no defined recipe for what makes a fun game fun. It's all a matter of feeling it out as you go and understanding some fundamentals of game development. But ultimately, if you want to pursue a new project and break new ground with game development, it's all about constant experimentation, constant creative experimentation, hampered by Amazon's kind of very linear way and data-driven way of doing things. There were also issues with the kind of culture that Amazon established within their studios, with sources calling it a bro culture that often, left women not being given the same opportunities as men and plenty of people reporting, leadership mistreating those below them and the like. Amazon didn't even provide financial incentives like bonuses as other major companies do. It didn't help matters that Frazzini, on top of woefully lacking any experience with game development or managing game development studios, he also demanded that the developers chase trends instead of, working on their own unique projects. So, for example, the popularity of League of Legends inspired a project called Nova, which was canceled in 2017. The popularity of Fortnite inspired a game called Intensity, which was probably set to be a battle royale. That was canceled in 2019. And then Overwatch is what inspired the infamous Crucible project that was also canceled after it released, went back to beta, and then died off there. On top of leadership's lack of experience, on top of a corporate structure that didn't let ideas and experimentation and creativity flow, on top of mandates to chase trends in oversaturated markets, another mandate that got in the way was Amazon forcing developers to make their games using their own technology, their own engine called Lumberyard, which was considered to be a boogeyman around the office. That should give you an idea for just how enthused developers were about working with Lumberyard rather than established engines like Unreal Engine, which would make life a whole lot easier. Which finally brings us to the relevant portion for today's story. The company said in 2019 that it was working with the Chinese developer Lavoie Technologies Holdings on an online game based on the Lord of the Rings. Now, Amazon is still working on a Lord of the Rings TV series or streaming series meant to be streamed on Amazon Prime Video, and this was supposed to complement that game, but after recent developments, obviously the game is a no-go. The series is still in development, but it's not going to have that game to complement it. Personally, I don't think the series needs a game to complement it, but it would have been interesting to see what that game would have turned out to be and how it would have complemented the series and how they would have jived together. But mainly, I would have just been interested to see how an online Lord of the Rings game would pan out, though given it's developed by Amazon, I would feel less confident given their recent track record of failure after failure. And then there's the little-known game known as the Grand Tour, which is the only game that Amazon successfully managed to launch, but the game just straight up bombed. Reviews weren't great. People didn't buy the game. And this was all embarrassing enough that Amazon went out of their way to remove the game from storefronts a year later. And then we know what happened with Crucible. They pulled the release of the game in June and then killed it in October when it went back to beta. And so the only project Amazon has going right now that's active is an MMO known as New World, where a lot of the Crucible developers have been shifted to, and this is a project that also does seem to be troubled given the fact that they've delayed it numerous times already, though of all the projects that Amazon has worked on, including Lord of the Rings, this is the only one that's showing some semblance of promise. Though whether this game launches in an adequate state and whether it ends up drawing an audience, well, that remains to be seen. Now, in the case of Lord of the Rings, I don't know what the state of the game's development was, and that's something that Bloomberg doesn't talk about. This cancellation does seem to have an element of bad luck, where Tencent happened to purchase Lavoie Technologies in December, and their ideas for the game didn't happen to agree with Amazon's, leading to that cancellation, though we don't know on what points the two companies disagreed on. Was it, again, overall direction of the game? Was it monetization? Was it about revenue split and behind-the-scenes business-related stuff? Hard to say for sure, obviously, given the little information we have about this contract that they were disputing. Though I've got to say there's an element to this story that isn't just about Amazon, but also about the amount of control and influence that Tencent has as a massive conglomerate that is getting a piece of the pie of just about every company, and everyone wants Tencent to invest on them, and Tencent just can exert control over IPs and franchises and potential upcoming games in ways that other companies just aren't able to. Tencent is just growing so big, and the fact that they can just buy out a company and then renegotiate Lord of the Rings terms, and because the terms weren't satisfactory to them, have the influence to get that game canceled, I mean, that is a scary prospect. That is a dangerous precedent for such an influential company whose influence only continues to grow, especially when we're dealing with corporations whose best interest isn't the product, isn't the artistic integrity of games, isn't the customers, but money. It is profit by any means necessary. It's profit without considering the moral implications of some of their business models and business moves. Now, do I have any sympathy for Amazon executives who just lost out on a potential moneymaker? No, not really, but I do feel bad for the developers who were working on this for quite some time, only for business dealings to get in the way of their ability to work on a project that no doubt many were very passionate about. It's a new Lord of the Rings game. It's one of those really high-profile seminal projects that developers have been pulled away from because of decisions that are way above their pay grade. Amazon's streak of failures with game development continues, and it all goes to highlight that just throwing money at trying to make games isn't enough to successfully make games. It's all about experience. It's all about having the right people at the top who know what they're doing, leadership that has experience with game development and understands the requirements, understands the kind of creative freedom and experimental flow that is required for these kinds of environments to thrive. I suppose we'll see if over the years, over the myriad mistakes, Amazon learns from said mistakes and eventually do end up releasing compelling experiences and let developers get their creative juices flowing and leave them alone to do what they do best and lead them correctly. And if one day they end up releasing a blockbuster that even customers end up enjoying, it could happen if they continue to, invest in their game division. I mean, they're loaded as a company. This is all setbacks for them, but certainly nothing that'll kill them. But if they don't change their ways, if they don't put somebody else at the top of the Amazon game division to lead them, someone who knows what the hell they're doing and who will give developers the autonomy that they need to maximize their creativity and efficiency, well, I can only suspect that the string of failures will continue. Or at least that's one man's take on everything. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Amazon's game division's current standing, whether you think that they will one day release a successful game, or do you think they'll just kind of stay trapped in this cycle of not knowing what the hell they're doing, and eventually Amazon will give up on video games. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.